Hey everybody, it's Josh Goodman at the State Archives of Florida, and for the last few weeks we've been helping to celebrate the bicentennial anniversary of St. Johns County's establishment by pointing out some of the incredible historical records we have on the county here at the State Archives of Florida in Tallahassee. Today I'd like to look at a very critical moment in St. Johns County's history, indeed a critical moment for the entire United States, and that's World War II. In addition to supplying the United States military with about 248,000 men and women, Floridians also served extensively on the home front by working in defense industries, conserving food and strategic supplies like metal and paper and rubber and waste fats, and volunteering for civil defense programs, like these folks are doing in the photo you see here. Civil defense volunteers were incredibly important during World War II. So many men and women who normally would have served their communities by supervising police, fire protection, and other key community services were unable to do so during the war because they were off fighting on the front or working in a defense-related industry in some other area. The folks who were left behind had the responsibility of making sure their community was prepared for anything: air raids, a gas attack, shortages of food or water, transportation issues, child care for working families, recreation for soldiers, and all sorts of other tasks. The State Archives and State Library both hold a variety of materials that document this time period, which is interesting if you're working on an exhibit or if you're just curious, or if you have an ancestor who may have served in one of these civil defense capacities during the war. So let's take a look at some of these records. Many of them are available on the Florida Memory website, just like photographs like the one that you see here, where we've got some folks. This is actually in St. Petersburg on the other side of the peninsula, some folks standing outside a civic center where they are lining up to volunteer, possibly for military service or potentially for civil defense services there in their community. In addition to showing you some things on the Florida Memory website today, I'm also going to show you how to get your hands on some good materials that are not available online yet, but copies or scans can be easily requested from the reference staff here at the State Archives or State Library, depending on who has the item that you're interested in. If you're looking for archival records dealing with civil defense on the home front in Florida during World War II, one of the best places to start is the records of the Florida State Defense Council. To explain a little bit more about that, I'm going to start with an organizational chart that was produced by the St. Johns County Defense Council, which was a branch of the State Defense Council. So here we go. I'm going to use, by the way, I'm working here on the Florida Memory website. This is the official online outreach portal of the State Archives of Florida. We put the collections of the State Archives online here in digital form, as well as the special collections of the State Library of Florida. So I'm just going to work in the search box here and type in St. Johns County Defense Council. And now we'll run a search on the database to find all the objects that we have that are from the St. Johns County Defense Council. And to give you an idea of sort of what I talk about when I mean civil defense, I want to go to this organizational chart that's in the records of the St. Johns County Defense Council, many of which we've digitized and made available here on Florida Memory. So this is in our selected documents collection. These are documents where we have not necessarily digitized the entire collection, but we've found some representative examples of materials from the collections that we think would be really good and interesting for folks to have. And we can see if we look in the source line here in the catalog record that this item comes from series S419, which I can tell you is the records of the State Defense Council that we have here at the State Archives of Florida. So let's go ahead and blow this up a little bit because this is kind of small. We can't really read it. But if we click on it, we get into a version that we can zoom in into a very large size. But I'm going to just use the scroll wheel on my mouse here so that I can kind of zoom in slowly and see what we're dealing with. So, the State Defense Council of Florida was sort of an adjunct of the Office of Civilian Defense, which operated out of Washington, D.C. during the course of the war. And the Office of Civilian Defense at the federal level was in charge of coordinating all of the defense efforts here on the home front that were not taken care of by the military. They cooperated with the military in some cases, but this is a civilian organization and largely volunteer-based. So the Office of Civilian Defense, they were coordinating things like the Ground Observation Corps, people who were watching for enemy aircraft to make sure that, because we're talking about a time when radar is still in its infancy. And things like verifying that there were food supplies in the event of a shortage, making sure that people were obeying the rules concerning rationing and that sort of thing. And then under the Office of Civilian Defense, each state had its own State Defense Council. So you see that referenced up here at the top here, the State Defense Council of Florida. But the system goes even farther and even more granular than that. Each individual county, and in many cases municipalities, if they were big enough, had their own defense councils as well. And what you're looking at here is an organizational chart that shows all the different tasks and divisions that were under the purview of the St. Johns County Defense Council that operated under the State Defense Council of Florida. And we can see here that Colonel James Reynolds was the chairman of that council in St. Johns County. But look at all these different functions that these folks are taking a look at. Look at the divisions. Division of Civil Protection. Okay, so we got air raid wardens, fire guards, emergency food supply folks, civil evacuation folks, and a lot of these are going to be volunteers. These are going to be everyday citizens who, for one reason or another, they're not working, they're not in the military, they're not so much engaged in defense industry work that they're able to donate some time to making sure that some of these tasks get accomplished. If you've ever heard of like the concept of a block leader, like people who were living, were responsible for distributing information for people in their neighborhood or something having to do with civil defense. These are very similar types of volunteers, but as you can see, they're covering all kinds of different functions during the course of the war. So we've got the Division of Health and Housing, water supplies and fire protection, transportation and communications, power and fuel, information, education, and morale. And we got some more kind of administrative type stuff here like finance and budget, home and community services, recreation, and things like that. And essentially what the defense councils were doing here, and they were getting a lot of their cues about which divisions they actually needed to have. They're getting those cues from the state and federal civil defense authorities, is they were trying to prepare communities, sort of insulate communities from potential emergencies that could arise if the war were to come into Florida in a more profound way in the form of air raids, gas attacks, disinformation campaigns, all kinds of stuff like that. And what we love about these records is not only do we get a chance to see kind of what's going on the home front during World War II, but we get to actually see the names of the people who were involved in this. And as I look through this, I can see names of people that come up a lot in the 20th century history of St. Augustine as we go through here. We got a couple of former mayors. Here's a doctor, Dr. Settles, who had lived in the St. Augustine area for a very long time. Let's see who else we got here. J.H. Manussi, that's a fairly prominent family in that area. Let's see. Coombs, Gibbs. Let's see. Yep. Lots of folks there. There's S.M. Thrift. I don't know that I've seen him before. But lots of folks that you may recognize from the St. Augustine area and the St. Johns County more broadly. So great stuff. All right, so what else can we learn about civil defense in St. Johns County during World War II besides just the organizational chart? Well, when I ran that search earlier, let's see if I can bring my screen back down to normal size. If I go back out to my search results from which I chose this organizational chart, by searching for the St. Johns County Defense Council, I was able to bring up a lot of correspondence between some of the leaders of the Defense Council and state headquarters and some other folks to kind of get an idea of some of the things that were really important, that they were really concerned about, that produced a lot of paperwork. So, for example, up here at the very top, we've got a couple of booklets that the St. Johns County Defense Council put together on some of the things that were really of concern to them at the opening part of the war, because we can see from the dates here that we're looking at early 1942, just a couple of months after Pearl Harbor. The kinds of literature that they were putting out had to do with air raids and gas defense. And this is because, with submarine warfare ramping up and with a lot of uncertainty about just how close to the continental United States this war would get, People were honestly concerned, especially with St. Augustine and St. Johns County's exposed condition on the Atlantic coast, that everyday citizens could be facing a situation where they had to respond very quickly to an air raid or to a gas attack. And so what you're getting here is the local defense council's compilation of suggestions and instructions on what to do in these cases. And a lot of this is compiled from information that was coming from state and federal authorities, but some of it is kind of customized to deal with the exact landscape and circumstances of St. Johns County. And as you go through here, you're getting instructions to individuals, to people who happen to be caught in traffic if an air raid siren happened to go off. You'll see information in here about what to do if there was a blackout, if there was a chance of an air raid happening at night. Obviously, there's a lot of lights in St. Augustine and in the surrounding area, not just in people's homes, but also on streets and on the Bridge of Lions and all this other stuff. These are things that the civil defense officials had to plan for. Somebody had to be responsible for dealing with sources of light in the event of a blackout, or what to do if all the kids are still in school at the time that an air raid occurs. All of this had to be thought through because people truly feared that this war could come right over the top of them, and they wanted to be prepared. So that's why booklets like this came through. So if we go back to our search results, we'll take a look at gas attacks too. All right. And it's really surreal to look at this because it's been a while since many of us who are living today have, if we've ever had to think about what we would do in the event of something like a poisonous gas attack. I mean, it's very foreign to our existence. And by the way, anytime you may not be able to read the words that are on the screen here, but anytime you find one of these records that you like, just click on the images and they can get, as you can see, very, very large. So you can zoom in on that to see what you're reading there. Okay, and by the way, some of these do not yet have transcripts. If there is a transcript, you'll see it pop up right down here between the description and metadata tabs on the catalog records. But we'll show you an example of one that does have a transcript later, and I'll show you how you can volunteer to actually help us transcribe these materials, which makes them easier to search and share and use in classroom applications and things like that. So, all right, so we've looked at a couple of different kinds of booklets that were produced by the State Defense Council. So let's see, what else is going on in St. Johns County during the course of World War II? Now, I mentioned that part of the demand for civil defense volunteers came from the fact that many of the people who would normally provide police and fire protection to their communities were all fighting. So a lot of other people had to step in, including retirees and people who didn't necessarily have a lot of formal training or experience in defense work, in civil defense work, but that was kind of the job of civil defense officials in each county, was to sort of deal with that dearth of experience and training and to fill in the blanks here. So what we've got here is an example of a graduation program from a SNAP course in basic law enforcement, because there was an auxiliary police force that operated in St. Augustine during the war, and this is one of the classes that they held. This is from 1944, so a little towards the second half of the war there. And you can see that the local police chief, Virgil Stewart, had pitched in here, and also they had a chief of auxiliary police, Harry Mangus, who actually was also a member of the class. If we go to the next page here in just a minute, you'll see that he was actually taking the class as well. So leading by example. And these are folks, everyday citizens, and if I go back out to the catalog record, I can go to the second page, and I can actually see the names of the graduates from this program. And here they are. And you can see that a couple of the folks who went through the class are actually also speaking at the graduation. So really this is, it's the leaders of this group were definitely leading by example here. Harry Mangus is in the list, for example, of the students. But you can get the names of the folks who are involved with this. And we love this because, we certainly have a great deal of respect for our veterans who were directly involved in the military and fighting on fronts in faraway lands. But we also had a lot of people who were doing extremely important work right here on the home front. So if you're you're a teacher, for example, and you're trying to sort of get at what the experiences of everyday people were like during the war, the military experience is certainly a huge part of that. But you've also got these other unique experiences that are happening right here on the home front for just everybody there. So yeah. All right. So let's see. I think one of my favorite documents that we have from St. Johns County in World War II, I'm going to go back to our menu of choices here, and I want to look, let's see, it's instructions for what to do at the end of World War II right here. This is a letter from James Reynolds Jr., who was the chairman of the St. Johns County Defense Council, to Albert Blanding, for whom Camp Blanding is named. And it's talking about procedures for the announcement of victory in Europe. So it gets to the spring of 1945, and it's pretty clear, the Allies are moving pretty quickly across Europe and closing in on Berlin, but victory had not necessarily been declared just yet. That wouldn't happen until May. So, but obviously that was going to be a pretty momentous occasion, and there was going to be a lot of celebration, and there was some concern that if those celebrations were to get out of hand, they might do more harm than good. And not only that, there could also be potentially some confusion about what exactly was happening when this victory was announced. Because as you can imagine, a lot of horns blowing, a lot of traffic jams, a lot of people shouting and hollering, and in an era where information was not quite as readily available as we have it now with cell phones and the internet and things like that, it was important for folks to communicate ahead of time about what the signals would be when victory was declared and what the proper procedures would be. So, if we go right into the memo, we can see that they had thought of just about everything. They had instructions for stores. If the announcement of victory was made before 3 o'clock p.m. on a certain day, the stores would close for the rest of that day and then open the next day. If the announcement was made after 3 o'clock p.m., the stores would close and remain closed until noon the following day. And there's similar provisions in here for schools, government offices, all kinds of stuff like that. Also, interesting bit right here, for bars and liquor stores and things like that. As soon as the announcement for victory was made, all bars and liquor stores were required to close immediately. You can imagine that the celebrations at the end of the war in Europe were going to be pretty hefty. So they were trying to get ahead of that a little bit, make sure those didn't get too rowdy and out of control. However, I think the thing that gives me goosebumps is when I read this last part here towards the end, and this is a photocopy of this, a mimeograph rather, and so it is a little bit fuzzy when you zoom in too far. But if we look at this, it says under the signal heading, "The surrender will be made known by a steady blast of 2 minutes duration sounded by the St. Johns County Defense Council sirens under the direction of the chairman of the St. Johns County Defense Council." So imagine for a moment what it would be like to be working in a shop or a store, or be in your car, or be a student sitting in a classroom in your school when for the last few years you've had your meat and sugar and other important foodstuffs rationed. You've had to forego vacations. You've had loved ones who are overseas because they've been fighting the Axis powers, and then all of a sudden you hear this siren, and it's just steadily blaring for 2 minutes, declaring that this episode of American history was over. It gives me chill bumps just to think about it. And so these moments like that are documented in what people at the time must have thought were very routine records. But they hold so much power and so much historical significance for us now. And we're making them available for you right here on Florida Memory. So, all this is interesting stuff, but where is it all coming from, and how do you know what we have online and what we don't have online yet? Okay, so let's talk about that. First of all, if I look up here in my breadcrumb tree, all the documents that we've talked about so far are coming from our selected documents collection, as I've mentioned. That means we've kind of picked a few things out of these collections that are represented in the source field for each catalog record. We've picked a few things out of these series, but we haven't necessarily digitized the whole thing. If you want to see collections where we have digitized the whole collection, then you can go to the Historical Records page under the Discover menu on Florida Memory, and that'll get you lots of choices where we have digitized the whole thing. But these are just selections. So once we know what series something is from, I'm going to go back to one of our records. So once you know the series that something is from, series S419, you can use that information to find more documents from that same series on Florida Memory. You can also use that code to find things in the Archives online catalog, which is kind of like Florida Memory, except it's a listing of records that we have here, not so much actually showing you the records themselves. But let's talk about first how to find all the materials that we have from a series. What you'll need is this little code right here. So if you wanted to find all the records that we have online from the records of the State Defense Council, series S419, we can go up to the search box here and just put S419 in quotation marks. And it's going to take a minute because we've got a good number of records from here. We've got 80 different items, and that list is growing as we go, because this is as you can imagine, a pretty popular topic. And wow, instructions for a sniff kit for determining if you've got gas in your home. We've got wonderful photographs. There's those two booklets from the St. Johns County Defense Council. We've got cartoon strips, just explaining why people should be saving their waste fats, to make glycerin for explosives. We've got some documentation of the methods of setting up civilian aircraft observation posts. All kinds of materials just like that. Now, it's important to keep in mind that while Florida Memory has a lot of great materials on the website and is expanding all the time, it only offers a fraction of what's available here at the State Archives of Florida. So let's look at how to get a complete list of everything that we have from the State Defense Council records here at the State Archives. First thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to change over to the State Archives online catalog instead of being on Florida Memory. So I'm going to go up here to the address bar in my browser and type archivescatalog.info.florida.gov. Look at that, I've already got it. And this is going to take you to a completely different website, but again, this is the listing of the collections that we have here. And archives arrange their materials in a hierarchical order where you've got collections, and then within that you've got boxes or volumes or containers of some sort. And then within the containers, sometimes you got more containers like folders or folios or something like that. But I'm going to search at the collection level because the State Defense Council seems pretty important. It seems like we would have a whole collection of materials. So I'm going to search for State Defense Council, and I'm going to search at the series collection level instead of using container or something like that, because I know I'm looking for a whole collection. I'm betting that I'm going to find some good material there. So I'm going to click search, and sure enough, I'm rewarded with several really good results here. We've got financial ledgers from the Defense Council, their subject files, there's that S419 that we were seeing on those records in Florida Memory. We've got the minutes of the State Defense Council, scrapbooks, which I can tell you, having looked through those are pretty cool. We've also got a number of posters. A lot of those are already on Florida Memory as well. So let's take a look at subject files though, because if we look at the amount of material in each of these collections, the richest one is this one that's 31 cubic feet. That's, if you can visualize 31 banker's boxes, that's about 31 cubic feet. So pretty significant. We're going to get a little bit of information that, sorry, I skipped over that kind of quickly. This is the catalog record for the full collection. It'll tell you a little bit about how it's organized, what's in it, tell you about the creators. But if we click on this folder icon, it'll take us to a listing of all the items in that collection, box by box, folder by folder, and look how granular it gets. We're talking about agriculture, whatever action divisions are, even things talking about playing football at night because people were concerned about the lights from football games that were played at night, possibly aiding submarines in aiming the shots that they were taking at ships or potentially even land. Lots of different things. Now, there's a trick that I showed some folks in the last meeting, and I'm going to show it to you again here. These pages will give you results, 30 results at a time, which is fine. If you're interested in doing the research, of course, a lot of folks will just click right on through. But if you want to see a lot of stuff really fast, I can show you a trick. Up here in your address bar, we've got some gibberish, essentially, but these are actually instructions to the server about how to display your search results. And if you go to the piece here that says Record Max, and you type in anything less than 1,000, so maybe 999. I'm going to back out the 30 there and hit enter. It will actually show you that number of records instead of just the 30. So now, wow, you've got essentially the whole collection in one spot. So here's those folders from St. Johns County where we have some things digitized from Florida Memory. But look at all these other things that you can find. Stuff about radio stations, publications, the Public Works Administration, Price Administration Office, some of those efforts to fix the prices of foods in restaurants and things like that. You've got some publications from some of the local defense councils like the Polk County Defense News. Lots of stuff. Participation by African Americans because civil defense efforts were by and large segregated during the course of this. Jim Crow is still in full control at this point in Florida. All kinds of amazing information in here. Lots to do. So, all right, we have taken a look at some really interesting examples of documents we have here at the State Archives documenting what was going on in St. Johns County during World War II. I hope that you'll enjoy getting a look at some of these fascinating records, both on Florida Memory, and I hope that you'll come and see us here at the State Archives and get a look at some of these others that maybe we haven't digitized just yet. But, of course, we have this for St. Johns County and for communities all across the state. So no matter what part of Florida you're interested in, we can certainly help you get a look at what civil defense looked like in those places. And I want to leave you with one little bit of contact information for our reference archivists here at the State Archives. And here's that information for you. So you've got our phone number, our email address, and here's the databases that we've been looking at today. This is the Archives Online Catalog, where we were just looking at the contents of Series S419 for the State Defense Council, FloridaMemory.com, and of course the State Library's online catalog, which you may find some additional published materials from the State Defense Council, and even some of the county defense councils will have things in there as well. Jacksonville, for example, some of their defense council materials that were published and reproduced, many copies, those are in there as well. So some great information. All right, well, once again, happy 200th anniversary, St. Johns County. And I hope that we'll get the opportunity to serve you soon here at the State Archives and State Library of Florida.